Hi, I'm Tara Palmeri, your feared and fearless political journalist, back with another revealing interview with Rahm Emanuel, President Joe Biden's former ambassador to Japan. After coming back from Asia, he's busting out with a Democrats Need to Come Clean tour. So that's why I couldn't help but ask him what he knew and when he knew about Joe Biden's condition, since he was working for him after all. You might be surprised to hear what Rahm said and what he didn't say. He also talks about why the Democrats lost in 2024. He said that there should have been a primary and that Kamala Harris should not have been given the nomination. We talk about a number of hot-button issues like the Democratic National Committee's vice chair, David Hogg, putting millions of dollars behind younger candidates to challenge the old guard of incumbents, just to bring in some fresh blood into the party, even if it leads to an intra-party battle royale. We talk about how President Trump is using allegations of anti-Semitism to defund universities. And he warns that the Jewish community should not be naive about being used by Trump. And of course, we talk about his own ambitions. Let's just say he left the door open for 2028. Take a listen here. Ambassador Emanuel, thank you for joining the show. You've worked for 3 presidents, most recently for the Biden administration as ambassador to Japan. Is it okay if I call you Rahm, though, for the show?
Yeah. I answer to a lot of other names with 4-letter words. So
I'm sure, having worked so closely with presidents, chief of staff to President Obama, senior advisor to Bill Clinton. And as a creature of the Washington game, you understand that it can get pretty high wire and intense. I wanted to ask you, just to kind of jump on some of the news, everybody's talking about how President Trump is using anti-Semitism to justify threatening, universities and deporting and imprisoning Arab students without due process and much less any respect for the First Amendment. Are you concerned about this?
Yeah, look, I'm concerned both about anti-Semitism and then the use of anti-Semitism actually as cover and camouflage to achieve political ends. So first and foremost, universities needed to shape up for the fact that a lot of Jewish students did not feel comfortable, and they permitted an atmosphere that they would not permit for any other minority student. Second, though, to the core of your question, President Trump and his team are just basically getting the goods through customs. And they're using anti-Semitism to accomplish a political agenda vis-a-vis higher learning. And the Jewish community, you're asking me this question on Passover. Yeah. It has never done well in 2,000 years of history where you replace the law with the rule of one individual. And if you go through our history as a people, no community is probably better benefited from the kind of era of enlightenment, rules of law, and the whole permutation around the law as opposed to an individual making an edict. And I think that it's not an accident. Another piece of this is that Donald Trump committed and started his career under the counsel of Roy Cohn, who was Joe McCarthy's political consigliere. And McCarthyism really went after a number of institutions. Higher education was the zero focus of it. Central part of the target to destroy academic freedom and a counter voice to the type of anti-communism that Joe McCarthy was leading. So to me, this has been a battle going back to the 50s. But I think the Jewish community should not be naive in being used here. And if you want to deal with students who perpetuated not just anti-Semitism or other type of issues, have them be an intern at the Holocaust Museum for a year and do community service. I'm not sure that's justified. You're allowed to express your views. I think that I would not want to be identified with people that killed, like Hamas, 1,200 people, citizens, because they were Jewish, rip a fetus out of women and all that, and anti-LGBTQ rights. But that's your call. We're a strong enough, vibrant enough society that we can handle having that idea out there and be questioned. But I think it's dangerous not only to the Jewish community, it's dangerous to America, where institutions of a higher learning are being pressured politically. And anti-Semitism is just the cover. It's camouflage.
Right.
And it's not real. And then there's a whole second
What about
layer
the
of
deportations of these Arab American students?
Look, I'm not for. I don't think, as I said to you, it gets to the core issue. I know what's going on. It's not just A, it is Arab Americans, and B, it's also students who have different political views. There's a way to reform a university because they had gotten off script. They permitted a culture that they should have gotten called on. I don't have a problem with that. But do not deport other students for their political views. That is not, in the name of America and its defense, that's not American. And B, I am never into breaking the law in the name of the law or using anti-Semitism as cover for that. As somebody who, when I was in ambassador to Japan, we had our house spray painted with Nazi symbols.
Wow.
When I was running for Congress, you don't know this. President Obama used to tease me that I was a first birther. I had to show my birth certificate. So I've dealt with that with old Jewish, anti-Jewish trope of not from here, not one of us. I knew what was going on. That said, I'm not into allowing the cover of anti-Semitism to be basically blur you from what's really going on here. There's a political agenda. Full stop. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And if it's really anti-Semitism, then why don't we deal with the individuals that are using Heil Hitler hand signals? Why don't we deal with the fact that some of the people, the first protest in Virginia was that Donald Trump said they were good people, were using phrases like, the Jews will not replace us. Nobody seems to remember that. So if anti-Semitism is to your core what you want to fight, I got a few targets for you. I don't see anybody saying anything about it.
So I want to ask you a lot about the Democrats because there was a movement at one point to draft you.
Well, that was a quick switch. Thank you.
No, but I do want to keep asking you. I want to keep the convo going, though. I appreciate that. That was very powerful. I want to ask you though about the movement to draft you as DNC chair. And, a lot of people saw you as a knife fighter. And, obviously what the Trump administration is doing is pretty smart. I mean, they are taking a lot of issues that are publicly popular, like anti-Semitism, trying to clean up gangs, but they're obviously, expanding the power and using it to break laws and to justify that as a means to, essentially like defying court orders, pressing the constitutional powers. But, tariffs, for example, I know there's a lot of talk about, how do Democrats actually properly position what President Trump is doing with tariffs to make sure that they use this as a messaging that they win in the midterms? Like Trump will argue, I'm leveling the playing field. I'm helping American workers. He's helping farmers. And let's not forget that for so many years, Democrats were actually the party that was for tariffs. So how do Democrats not mess this up and actually seize on this and show people that things are more expensive because of Trump's policies? Well,
first of all, you're asking me that question when it's very clear the American people have gone south on the tariff tax. They know that the tariffs are taxes. It's self-evident. I mean, look at all the public opinion survey and how quickly it went south. And if you weren't sure, your 401k going south pretty much drove the point home. So,
but not actually everybody. Some people don't look at the stock market as an indicator.
Yes and no. You got 62% of the country invested with 401k. So that's one piece. But also, the public's opinion has already issued a verdict on the tariffs. It's very clear. Now, if you're looking for 100%, you're going to sit there a very long time waiting for that phone to ring. But there's a clear majority, and overwhelmingly, also with persuadable swing voters, not just Democrats, that this is a bad economic piece. And Trump has said, well, we may have it kind of nonchalantly, which is ridiculous in my view from a political standpoint, we're going to have a recession. And people are going to tie the recession to the tariffs. And remember, in 2026, this is a referendum on Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And so if the economy, both from an inflationary standpoint, unemployment standpoint, economic growth, et cetera, or it feels like a recession, that's where the midterm will be. And not just the midterm, but also New Jersey and Virginia's off-year elections in 2025. That will be a verdict on Donald Trump. Where we go post-2026, we have to show a competence as Democrats, driving home, keeping the entire focus and energy on Donald Trump and the Republicans and what they're doing, and where they're dealing with the price of Greenland, not the price of groceries. And already you have, forget just the economic experts, they're already talking about the fact, and people have expressed this. You've seen this in the University of Michigan survey. You've seen it in other consumer surveys. They now public sees inflation going up. Donald Trump said on day one, I'll stop inflation.
So this is really just about making it about Trump, but a lot of people are willing to give him time. Like even Dave Portnoy said, I'm going to give him time. I mean, people in my own family who are pro-Trump, they're like, I'll give him time. Let's see what happens. Because in fairness,
you're asking me, look, we're only 80 days in, and he's gone from 52 to 42. You know where the trend lines are from an job approval standpoint. And that's just 80 days in. Second, that is the opinion of your family members. We'll talk about whether you should keep them. But it's a lot, not just them. It's a lot of people publicly. Let me just finish, if I could. One is their opinion on the tariffs as taxes, clear, overwhelming. Two, expectations on inflation, very clear. It's what's got the Fed worried, which is why they've already indicated there will be no interest rate cuts because they got to fight inflation. And people, it's at the highest level that inflation will be going up in the last 20 years from an expectation standpoint. So, and I do think between 2020 now and 2026, this is a referendum on Donald Trump. And it is a referendum on the Republican Party. And that's exactly how the voters are going to view it. Now, I am a product of my experiences, my work. In 2006, when we took the House back, we made a 1-2 punch. One is the House that Tom DeLay built, all about the corruption. And I think we're heading into this crony capitalism, as you can see through the tariffs. And then 2, 6 and 06, that had to have a modicum of support. But in the end of the day, 2006 was a referendum on George Bush, the Republican Party, and the economic and international position of the Republicans at that point. And that's what's going to happen in 2026. Yes, so people today, 80 days in, will give him time. But the trend lines are quite clear already, and we're only 80 days in, unless something radically different happens on the economy and on its politics and prioritization. He had 3 things he had to do, and he is dealing with Greenland. He's dealing with a set of issues that people don't want him to deal with. He's not dealing with economy, not dealing with their pocketbook issue, sidetracked, and now he's doubled down on making it worse because the tariffs have actually impacted them economically.
I want to get back to your party, though. Like in the meantime, David Hogg, he's the DNC vice chairman. There's a new story out in the New York Times about how he is going to get involved in primaries. He wants to usher in a new generation, and he thinks that going after members in solidly blue Democratic districts, he's going to spend $20 million to primary incumbents as a way of sort of getting the old people out of the party and bring in a culture of younger, fresher blood. He said there's a culture of seniority politics in the Democratic Party. And I don't think he's entirely wrong in the sense that it does feel like the Democrats are constantly in a retread moment, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. You know, what do you think about what David Hogg is doing? I mean, typically the party does not get involved in primaries, but isn't it time to kind of give the next generation a chance if the Democrats are just being saddled with boomers, basically?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So that's the short answer to your question. That is what primaries are for. So there's a kind of a double-edged sword here. Is that really the role of the vice chairman of the DNC to encourage that versus have people file, have people run for offices if they want to challenge people, etc.? That can happen. Now, you have 24 hours in a day. I have 24 hours in a day. My time's usually figuring out how to win elections where Democrats can beat Republicans. You want to spend your time in your 24 hours figuring out how Democrats can beat Democrats? That's a choice you make in your schedule in your day. He's on the premise is a time for younger, stronger voices to come up through the party. yes, and that's what voters will decide if they file and run. Whether the vice chair of the DNC, given that the brand of the Democratic Party is at 27%, given that we have what I think has all the makings of a wave election against Donald Trump and the Republicans, going back to what I just said to your prior question, whether that time and energy should be building the infrastructure of the party to win primaries or infrastructure of the party to win general elections. Because everybody you're going to take on in a primary is an incredibly safe blue seat and an incredibly guarantee that 98% of their voting will be the same. And so I am, as somebody who spent a good part of my congressional career recruiting people to run in districts that we had never won before and flip seats from what was then described red to blue. I appreciate winning elections, especially general elections, because elections have consequences. And when you have the majority, you have the ability to do things that you couldn't do when you were the minority. But flipping seats around in a minority is exactly that, flipping seats around in the minority.
How would you have handled David Hogg if you were DNC chair?
Well, that's a hypothetical we don't need to answer.
Maybe involve some four-letter words or no?
I don't know. I think I've been very clear about my view about where the laser focus of the party should be. And I know that I've talked to people in the party, not since that comment, but nobody asked me where do we recruit candidates in solidly Democratic districts. And it's just a matter of priorities. If I was in the DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee chair, where I was in 2006 and 2008, when I was working for President Obama, the other roles I've had, it's about winning so you have a majority so you can execute your policy objectives. And if you can tell me taking on a primary in a purple or red-leaning district is the way you want to go. Look, there are some Democrats in Congress and in other districts where Donald Trump won. Are you primarying those people?
Yeah.
No, wait a second. You asked a question. They've proven they can pick the lock of the congressional district that Donald Trump won. If you look at their voting record, they're probably more cooperative and collaborative with Donald Trump than somebody in a safe blue district. So are you talking about primarying that person? Now, if you don't like the age...
He's saying safe districts. He's picking safe ones, he said. Well, allegedly. We'll have to see.
Okay, so my view is if you're looking for somebody that will fight in younger voices and you only want blue districts, that means the people that not frequently, but more frequently compared to other Democrats are voting with Donald Trump. You're going to leave them alone. That's not the fight you're looking for. So there's a little subtext here and subterranean. So I get the generational piece of the argument, and Democratic voters in those districts, congressional, U.S. Senate, gubernatorial, county, they'll pick whether they want this young voice versus that kind of establishment. And that's what primaries are for.
Yeah. It's just interesting to see money being spent. It is interesting also to see some of the oldest voices in the party, like Bernie Sanders, coming up with some of the freshest ideas. I mean, what do you think about the fact that Bernie Sanders and AOC are drawing 20,000 people in Idaho? I mean, it seems like the rest of the party is a bit slow to the punch on Trump and waiting on messaging, consultants, polling, while they're just out there. And,
I think it's a tale of two parties.
Okay.
I'm not sure I buy what you did in the total analysis. And what I mean by that is separate Washington for a second. And the main part of that comes down to the funding for the government, et cetera. That's the main point of that. Every special election outside of the two Florida congressionals, Democrats have won since November. And what's more fascinating to me was not just that they won them. In 2023 and 2024, Democrats were winning special elections when there was low turnout. Post-November, we're winning special elections with high turnout. That was supposed to be terrain that wasn't favorable to us. One of the most fascinating things of 2 weeks ago, when you had Florida and Wisconsin up, was one, the broad base results out of the Wisconsin statewide Supreme Court race, not just Milwaukee and Madison. Then the second thing was in Escambia County, which is where Pensacola was, Getz's district. Donald Trump won that district by 19 points.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrat won it by 3. In 80 days, you move 22 points. 14% of that county is veterans, over double the national average.
Right.
It's been decades since a Democrat won that county in a federal election. So to me, you have the telling signs here, which is why I believe 2026, 2025 have the potential to be wave election as a referendum and keeping the focus on Donald Trump and the Republican stewardship of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that those elections tell you now where the voters are starting to show early signs. And we have won everything except for the 2 Florida congressionals, although in those Florida congressionals, you even see the recipe for a Democratic 2025 and a Democratic 2026.
Yeah, it does seem like Hogg's work, could like usher in a whole new wave of AOCs, younger people primarying establishment Democrats like Joe Crowley.
I got all that, and I hear you on that.
I mean, she's raising a ton of money right now too, and it seems like that they might hijack the party, though. With all
I don't know about
that
hijack.
momentum.
I think 30 years ago when I started in politics with President Clinton, we had liberals, call them today progressives. We had moderates, we had conservatives. We've basically moderates and conservatives are being pushed. Okay, that's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And that means also, as you've seen over the years, I come from a view, politics is addition. We're losing African-American voters, mainly male. We're losing Hispanic voters. Mm-hmm. We're losing Silicon Valley. We're losing other pieces of the Democratic coalition and working class voters throughout the country, regardless of race or ethnicity or gender. We're losing them. I want to stop that. Now, I'm a product of my experiences. I try to win purple to red districts, not blue districts. So here's a test. You're going to have a Virginia, New Jersey election, right?
Yeah.
Coming up in 2025. Less than a year away, right? Mm-hmm. What's the chances that the nominees for governor in those states will have AOC and Bernie Sanders come campaign for them? So let's take your question.
Yeah.
Well, no, wait a second. No, just don't shove it off. Mm-hmm. You talked about energy. You talked about the future. I'm talking about not winning primaries. I'm talking about winning general elections.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, though. Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, how do you win? Virginia it has a Republican governor. It's probably the best chance we have to flip the state on a governorship, right? So
with Abigail Spanberger, a blue dog.
Okay. Okay, let's assume, which is safe to assume, she's going to have the general election. She's going to be our nominee. Mm-hmm. How do you prepare the ground politically to win the general election, not the primary?
Right.
Okay. That's how I look at it. What is the agenda? What's the issues? What's the terrain? Who's the surrogates you want? How do you do that? That's the test. That's where the tire meets the road.
Exactly, but the momentum's on the left right now. So
I think the you can run a campaign in Virginia then. Yeah. I'm not, to me, the question is, there is you say it's on the left. I think there's energy in the Democratic Party. And I think there's disappointment in the moderate swing voters with the people that basically cast their vote with Trump. And he's already down in the 20s among independent voters. So to me, that's where the focus is.
Yeah. But I mean, I saw you on Jon Stewart, by the way. And I loved what you said, that it was like time to come clean. It was a time to come clean tour, like own what happened. And I think that a lot of those voters, though, they were unhappy with the Democratic Party over what happened with Joe Biden replacing the ticket. There wasn't really there wasn't a democratic process. I mean,
they have a right. Yeah, that's when I was saying that. Meaning when on the show when I talk, we have to own our mistakes. The first and there's the owning it. That's a piece of it. Closing schools for 2 years when it wasn't necessary to close schools for 2 years during COVID, and now we have the 30-year lows in reading and math scores. And stop looking at your shoes. You have to own it. We made a mistake. Here's what we learned, and here's how we're going to improve. We have to own it when we basically allowed communities and families, et cetera, on their own to face off against China. And you have to say, here's what I learned. Here's what I'm going to do to make better. If you want people to give you a second chance, you got to say, here were the mistakes that were made. And there were mistakes made along the way. I do think, as I've said before, and I said it on that show, the core crux of our message is that the American dream is unaffordable. The American dream is inaccessible. And that is unacceptable to us. Rather than just getting a shot, you're getting the shaft. And Washington owes you better. And that is what people are angry about, and they have every right to be angry. As somebody who, provided the first city to provide free community college, one of the first cities to raise the minimum wage, one of the first cities to do universal pre-K, giving people the tools so that both they, their family, and their children can succeed. I saw parents who were literally in this quagmire of, do I take a second mortgage on the house? Do I take a second job so my kids can have a college education? 20,000 kids in Chicago got to college free, of which 3/4 of them are the first one in their family ever to go to college. That, to me, is an answer and starts to scratch the itch that is really put people in a vice economically.
I do want to go back, though, to the idea of coming clean. When did you realize that Joe Biden wasn't fit to run for re-election? I mean, you worked for him in a strategic position in the world, Japan.
Yes,
you've said it yourself.
Yeah. Look, I've talked about this with the White House officials, etc. And I think it's fair to say to you, is there anything that looks and comes across from Rahm Emanuel that's shy, reserved, and soft-spoken?
No.
Okay. So I expressed myself, expressed my view, and I've been clear. I was clear as recently as yesterday also about President Biden speaking out, taking the focus away from Donald Trump. I believe 100%, like a laser focus on make this a referendum about Donald Trump.
Yeah, but like, when did you really notice that this is not this guy? I can't give you that. I can't give you the hour and the day that I said it, but was it a year in? Was it 2 years in? When was it? When did you realize this guy can't run for re-election? What are we doing?
No, it wasn't. The year in and 2 years in is not the time frame, but it was. I don't have the exact date, and I'm not going to sit here and guess about it, but I expressed myself to individuals that were reported.
Did you send any fire alarms out to people in the party? I mean, you're hyper connected. Obviously you work for.
I let people know that could have an influence on that decision.
And what did they say to you?
Okay. Well, one of the things that I think is important is I don't try to sit there and expose private conversations. If you do that, you're very rarely to have another private conversation.
I understand that, but if this is really about coming clean and moving forward, owning our mistakes, this seems like a very this is the most recent
but that's not
big
the question
mistake.
I agree. I don't disagree with that, and I think part of the problem was the fact that the decision was too late, and also when it was too late, not having a process. That is coming clean. That's part of the clean. But when I said coming clean, not to use my words against me, that is not what I said. Coming clean was about the economic and the consequences of the American dream. I get that, but I feel like
coming clean is also acknowledging the biggest mistake that happened, which was the last election. And if it didn't happen, then we wouldn't be here right now. We'd have we'd be in a totally different world.
Yes, from Tokyo, I expressed myself to the people that were in important places about the importance, and I told them in no uncertain terms of what I thought the consequences were in heading down this.
Were you ever in a skiff with the president? Did you ever get one-on-one time with him?
No.
Really? The 4 years that you were running? I mean, that you were in office with him?
The first I got confirmed, and then we did a call with Prime Minister Kishida in the Situation Room. But the idea that I was in a skiff in a secure place where it was just him and me talking, in both from a communication standpoint, a skiff,
on communication. You could be in Japan, but over the phone in a secure communications situation. You never had that.
But not with the President of the United States. And if I did, I wouldn't tell you. It's not I've never exposed my conversation with President Clinton, President Trump. I'd rather President Trump.
Yeah, I know. It's just weird because Janet Yellen and there's a lot of reporting that she never had any time with Joe Biden, and a lot of these very senior officials in the administration just never had any access to him. So they claim that they didn't know what was going on because of that they didn't realize the condition he was in. That's why I think it's interesting to know.
Okay. I told you what I can tell you.
Okay. All right. Well, I do want to get back to, where we were, which I'm sorry, I'm just surprised that you didn't have any time with the president. I'm like, it's still an interesting thing to hear. But
I think I don't, since you used Janet Yellen's across the street at the Treasury.
Yeah.
I was in Tokyo.
But it's a strategic position, like, as you said.
I know, but you of course, it's a strategic position, and the lion's share of my time was dealt on the responsibilities I had. I dealt with the people in both the White House, State Department, Defense Department. As it relates to the president, I was not in the White House, or did I have a phone call, just him and me, on that effort.
Yeah.
And whatever time I did have was usually like when I was up in Camp David, around the United States, Japan, and Korea, and the trilateral that was set there. We were dealing with what was a historic moment.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to ask you, though, you're, on a lot of podcasts, Jon Stewart. I saw you on Bill Maher. You were on Kara Swisher. I've seen you on Substack with Chris Lizza. And, you don't have a book coming out. And I was just sort of wondering, like, why the media tour?
How do you know?
Oh, really? You have a book coming out?
There's a book I'm working on the concept right now.
Oh, okay.
People interesting.
But people often write books, go on media tours. If they're looking at 2028, and your name has been tossed out as a person that we could possibly draft, possibly be up there and a contender. Are you thinking about running?
Well, so a couple things. One is, to me, the real crux of the question, if I do decide, and I've said this before, so it's not new, I'm not done with public service. I'm hoping it's not done with me. I've had both appointed position and electoral positions, both at the local level and national level. There's a core question, which it gets back to the American dream and the access. I think the real challenge for one of the
that
most
sounds like
a
politician answer.
No, it's actually it's a person who's been around politics in the bestest sense, which is
yes or no. Are you thinking about it? Let's talk like real people. Are you thinking about it or are you not?
Anybody in politics thinks about another office and thinks about where they can advance their stuff. I have a core question. I could have stayed as chief of staff. I decided to run for mayor because I wanted to do something about schools. So to me, before you run for office, the question is, what do you want to do once you get there, and what are the instruments? Now, we did certain things about economic growth and about education, about transportation, about the cultural life of the city. To run for president or to run for that office, you have to have as having worked for President Clinton and President Obama, what is it you want to do that you think that you could, in a proactive, affirmative way, do that others can't? And to me, the core issue that undermines and is an undercurrent to our politics over the last 20 to 30 years is that the American people feeling the American dream is out of reach for them and their children. And I don't think Washington actually, rather than giving people the tools or more of an opportunity, are getting the shaft. They're not getting the shot. And so I'm I got back here, no disrespect to you, you're trying to press me. I'm back at less than 4 months.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to make that decision just so I can give it to you on your podcast. I'm going to make a decision that's in my head, in my heart, and in my family that I have a discussion. And when I get it. I've heard that.
Okay. I appreciate that. I didn't think you would break it, but I figured, I might as well ask because.
But the one thing difference between you and I?
What?
I've run 6 elections.
Yeah.
And you got to know, and last time I checked, you haven't put your name on a ballot. And I want to make sure before I make a decision that I have a theory, I have a motivation, and I have an answer to what I think ails us.
You know what? I could never do what you do.
Okay. And I could never do what you're doing. And I have a capability of adding something that other people that are thinking about it as well, who I respect, I think I have an edge, both politically, policy, and in the capability of communicating.
You have really been in every single type of role, frankly, in terms of governance, chief of staff, member of Congress. I do want to ask you, though, about working for President Obama and President Clinton, because in those roles, you sort of were the architect of the world that we live in right now, like free market trade capitalism, bailing out the banks with President Obama, car makers. In some ways, it issued in the age of Trump and the rage that people are feeling right now. Well,
you could say that Eisenhower also gave us the age of Kennedy. Every president sets not only duresses, but sets the precedent. Their successor is the itch that never got scratched. That's how American presidential. Look, there was, one of the things, some people put President Clinton and President Obama, while they're different, in the same kind of category. And, I do like to note that they did issue, which was it? The Peace or Prosperity you didn't like most. And B, there are only two people, Democrats, who've been reelected, and not only elected, but reelected since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They've shown both policy chops and political chops. I think there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of Democrats who want to discard them. There's a lot of Republicans who admire their political skill. And, you touched on something, and it was a debate we had in the White House, March of 2009. I remember it because I had to skip going to my son. My family lived in Chicago. It was early in the Obama administration. And we had a debate. We had just passed the Recovery Act, other things. There was three big issues: healthcare, financial reform post the banking scandal, and cap and trade, climate change. And we had to pick, how do you prioritize and you balance policy, the politics, the timeline, the midterms, et cetera.
Right.
And we not only we were implementing the first kind of architecture around the implementation of the TARP. The Recovery Act was done. We had put together the resources in the auto task force. And I'm trying to give you context to these decisions, because context matters to the ultimate. And we're in the Roosevelt room on a Saturday, and appropriately, the domestic team said that if you don't use every day to get healthcare done, the sand's running through the dial. The financial team, economic team, was very worried that if you did financial reform, you were going to put the banks in a pause, and that would slow up the recovery out of one of the worst recessions since the Great Depression. I had argued with some other individuals that I thought we should do financial reform before healthcare, because I think the political system, the society, and the economics needed Old Testament justice with the banks. If you do healthcare, you have to work. The lesson out of President Clinton's experience was you had to work with the pharmaceutical, the insurance company, the hospitals to get it done. Otherwise, you were never going to be able to pass it. If you were doing financial reform, the entire industry, bankers and insurance companies, would be on the other side of the table, and you'd be fighting them. And I thought, as I said then, we needed Old Testament justice. Now the president gets paid big bucks. He made the decision to go healthcare first. I think from the passage, et cetera, given that the party over 100 years have been debating universal healthcare, that turned out to be the right decision for that. I think for dealing with the venom and the anger and the frustration that bankers were asking for their bonuses when people were losing their homes, did not deal with, and it had created some of the context. But that's, one of the things, having worked for President Clinton, President Obama, and then been a student of watching presidencies, there are trade-offs that those on the outside don't see.
Do you think that it led to this moment, though? Do you think that it led to the election of Trump?
I've said this before, and I've been. I think there were, in 2024, there were three kind of layers to understand the election. Layer one, 70% of the country thought the country was headed in the wrong direction. That was an anti-incumbent architecture. A layer below that is Kamala Harris inherits the mantle to be the nominee, or gets the baton.
You thought there should have been a mini primary, basically.
Yeah, but
who would you have backed?
Hold on, let me finish the first question. She starts 8 points down, runs on the economy all the way through the debate, and is 3 points up. That's 11-point swing. That's not a statistical error. and then switches, still I don't understand where this comes from, switches to democracy away from the economy. That drove her from 8 down to 3 up. I don't understand the schizophrenia of that election. From the debate, you can almost see the switch.
Well, she said that there was nothing that she would separate herself from with Biden. I actually think there was a moment when she said, there's not a thing that comes to mind when she was asked, what would you do differently? And then all of a sudden it was like...
Right. That was not a pop quiz.
Yeah.
And then the third layer is what I think is the crux of this moment in time, not the just 2024 and 2020 context. You have the Iraq war, which is built on a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of people lose their lives, lose their livelihood, and we spent $1 trillion in Iraq. 5 years later, you have the liar loans. People lose their homes, and bankers are demanding their bonuses.
Yeah.
And the American dream becomes totally unaffordable. It's the first generation of parents who think their kids' future is going to be worse off than their own. And I think dealing with that should have been a priority, which is why I wanted to make financial reform first of the 3 things that we were going to deal with post the Recovery Act, post the auto industry stabilization and bailout, as you called it. So to me, that explains not only 2024, 2020, 2016, 2012, 2008, because that moment, and I don't think our politics has fully come to grasp with the anger and frustration.
Yeah.
And so when I look at politics, college versus non-college, one divide. Urban versus rural, one divide. Male versus female, one divide. You could also say, not could say, but white versus black versus Hispanic versus Asian, one divide. The divide I think that needs to be appreciated and doesn't get talked about is establishment versus the public. Because through Iraq and through the financial, you have this total fundamental break where the American people want to take it, as Donald Trump says, I will be the instrument of your rage. And you saw it when the CEO of United Health was killed. And the American people, and I'm sitting in Tokyo, I've never seen something like this, start cheering the cold-blooded murder of an individual on the streets. And that tells you that while you have education is one divide, you have income is one divide, geography is one divide, establishment versus not the public is another divide that doesn't fully get kind of researched, understood, and explains a lot about not just 2024, but the last 5 presidentials since 2003 in the Iraq War.
Do you think that President Obama could have done more during those 8 years? I just had Maureen Dowd on the show, and she was saying that he just wasn't willing to do the kind of politicking and handshaking and going down to Congress and making calls.
You say that. The short answer is any president could have done. In retrospect, could have done more. I grew up in a home. We're a Franklin Delano Roosevelt Democratic household. I just came back from Japan. Should Roosevelt have interned the Japanese, but not the Germans? Okay. Should Roosevelt, given all the information he knew, bombed Auschwitz, which he knew? So, I'm also, you're asking me questions. Is there something that President Obama, in retrospect, there's something every president should have done differently. Right. They're human.
Right.
And there's mistakes made. And I always say, I'm not perfect. You look at the totality of their tenure. And I think the totality of their tenure, and I had many discussions and heated discussions with President Obama, President Clinton, about the policies and choices and what are the political ramifications of this, and not political, just electoral. But in the end of the day, is a country better off because we saved an auto industry, we got out of the worst recession, we better positioned America around the world, and we also have universal health care? Yes. And were there mistakes made along the way? Yes.
Yeah. Well,
he would say that himself.
Yeah. Well, I am using the Obamacare market actually for my healthcare, so I think that's a good thing, a good addition.
Well, you're about to watch your premium. Here's the thing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'll tell you what this is and this gets to a question about 7 ago that you asked. So you're going to have the debt limit in about 6-7 weeks. If I were the Democrats today, not 70 hours beforehand, but 7 weeks out,
Make
to
some
raise the debt
demands.
limit, well, demands is not the word I would use. Here are conditions for our support. We're ready to be your partner. 1, claw back a congressional authority on tariffs. 2, there will be no cuts in health care to pay for tax cuts for the rich. 3, here's what we're going to see for working families on tax cuts. And if you're willing to meet and negotiate with us in good faith around tariffs, healthcare, and taxes, we're ready to support you.
Yeah.
If not, you have both the gavels in both the House and the Senate and the microphone in the White House. Good luck.
Yeah. You know, there is one policy that Trump has that is popular, and that is the fact that the border crossings have pretty much like completely stopped. I mean, they're low, extremely low. And people, they're happy about that. That was a huge thing. It wasn't just the economy. It was immigration and the economy that got him elected. Clearly, the Biden administration didn't take it very seriously. They eventually closed off the border. But I saw that you were recently quoted saying that Chicago would continue to be a sanctuary city. Like, do you think that this is the right position for Democrats, or should they follow Trump in this
No.
I mean, yeah.
You are, since you wanted to talk about, you are looking at the guy under President Clinton who put together Operation Gatekeeper in San Diego, and Operation Safeguard, and was attacked by a lot of people that was a very too tough of an anti-immigrant policy. Here's my view. We're a country of laws and a country of immigrants, and we're going to respect both. It is what appeared in the border was not only breaking the laws, but also the chaos. I believe there should be a respect for the law. And the law is very clear as it relates to illegal immigration and crossing the border illegally, etc. 2, I do think there should be a total reform of our legal immigration and an enforcement of our laws as it relates to illegal immigration. And one of the things that is interesting to me is that since Simpson-Mazzoli passed in 1986 under Ronald Reagan, every president has tried to put both bubblegum, rubber bands, and glue, trying to stick together a reform of our immigration policies because it's broken. And I do think cities are dealing with their sanctuary cities because Congress and the White House since 1986, and it's now close to 40 plus years, hasn't done anything with a problem that is national, not just in cities. And if you're a mayor of a city with 147 languages spoken, I don't think kids should be out of school. I don't think kids should be just wandering around, or parents are scared to send the kids to school because of being picked up. I don't think that's healthy.
Yeah, no.
And I don't think that's safe. Okay, so you say something like, sanctuary city. I'm also the guy that implemented for President Clinton Operation Gatekeeper, Operation Safeguard, and how to deal with illegal immigration in the early 90s. But there's also a whole set of policies, and I think just the other day I saw President Trump talk about something different on legal immigration. How do you get to a place where we have laws and policies that reflect our interests and the respect for our both history, our culture, but also our economic and political system? And that's what you get. That's what leadership of the White House is about.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was great. And best of luck to you on your media venture and at the bank that you're working at as well. And of course, I'll be watching to see if you end up making that announcement. But you remained on my...
on my book?
The book announcement. That's the first step before the next step. But
you'll be surprised about the title. You'll be surprised about it.
You're on my draft card for now. So, all right. Thank you so much, Ambassador. To support my journalism, please hit that subscribe button and share this with your friends. To get my reports first and straight to your inbox, consider becoming a subscriber to my newsletter, The Red Letter, at TaraPalmeri.com. You can also become a VIP member of this channel, or even go a step further if you have the means by donating to my GoFundMe page. You can find it in the description to the show. See you again soon.